get started.
Yeah, I hear you.
And first of all, I'll say welcome this evening. I see some faces I know, some faces I don't. If you're okay, I'm just going to stand here, not use the microphone. But I'm Mike Broadwater. I'm the superintendent of Loveland City School District. This is year 2 for me. I've had a year and a half of an awesome experience. If you don't know, we just got 5 out of 5 on our report cards, and that's a big deal. And it goes to, there were 12 districts in the entire state of Ohio that achieved that. There are 607 districts. That puts us in, I always say it puts us in the top 1.97%, but it's a top 2% district. And there's 607 districts who are in the top 12. So academically, we are doing as well as we possibly can. If you see the ranks on the report card with the state, we're number 1. And that's always fun to be able to say you're number 1. The next stat that I kind of give out that I think resonates with people in Loveland is of the 607 districts, we rank 561st out of revenues per pupil. So let me say that again. We rank 561st out of the 607 districts in how much we receive per student. So 561 out of 607 puts us in the bottom 7% of revenues per pupil. So therefore, that means 93% of the other school districts receive more money per kid than Loveland. And then I go back and we'll repeat the first thing I just said is we got 5 out of 5 stars. So for me, I use a term, you get a pretty good bang for your buck. The revenues per pupil, if you're the bottom 7%, you can say you can manage your money different, do that, whatever. 93% of the other districts are managing it a little less than we are. And so for me, I'm very proud of the fact that we got 5 out of 5 stars, and we are the bottom, I'm not proud of the bottom 7% of revenues, but that's okay. If that's where we are, that's where we are. But we are delivering a very good product, and the reason we're doing that is because we have great kids, we have great families, our teaching staff is very dedicated, and I will tell you they're a veteran staff, and that's why we do so well, is because our staff works very, very well in the classroom. And I always say when you walk in, I'm an old high school math guy, I taught math for 15 years, coached football and basketball. I can do a high school math class, no problem. When I walk into kindergarten and I see 25 kids like this, and they call me a giant, and they turn around, there's 25 different reading abilities, 25 different math abilities. It's a hard job. Teaching has gotten harder and harder and harder, and I think I can say that because this is year 36. When I started, I had the red grade book that nobody peeked into, and I had the lesson plan book that nobody peeked into except my administrators. Now the accountability, right or wrong, and I think a lot of it is right, the accountability is very, very high for our staff, and they work very, very hard. And so I'm very proud of where we are with that. The next stat I'll give you is expenditures per pupil. If you remember, we just said, where are we for revenues per pupil? We are bottom 7%, right? So if you look at expenditures per pupil, out of the 607 districts, we are at 304. So that puts us right smack dab in the middle, 50%. So think about that for a minute. What does that mean? That means our revenues, which were bottom 7%, we try and take as much revenue per kid as we can and spend it in the classroom for our kids, and that's why it moves up to 50%. So when you see your revenues your revenues versus your expenditures, the expenditures in the classroom, that's a pretty high percent. I can tell you that revenue per student, we're right around $15,000 approximately. The highest is up in Cleveland. They receive $45,000 per student, $45,000 per student. I'm saying we're doing pretty well, okay? Our revenues are at $15,000. The expenditures per pupil around $12,000, $13,000. So the majority of our revenue is going to our kids, and we're scoring very, very high. What this levy, what we're trying to do, and I'll get into House Bill 920 if I haven't bored you with it before, but what we're trying to do is just maintain what we're doing. We're not trying to add bells and whistles. We're trying to maintain what we're doing. We're trying to maintain the awesome staff that we have. We're trying to maintain the programs we have. If I were to ask you, do you think our staff deserves a raise? Do teachers deserve a raise? Do bus drivers deserve a raise? Most people, they got families, right? Most people are going to say, man, maybe a cost of living adjustment, something like 1%, 2%, 3%, whatever. The minute you say yes to that, you have just said yes to a levy at some point. Because the issue we have in the state of Ohio is there is no inflationary adjustment to our revenue. If you look at our revenues, 2014 is the last operating levy we passed. That's 8 years ago. That's a long time for a school district like Loveland to go without additional revenue. How did we do it? Well, we cut 50 staff members. Okay? We got ESSER funds, about $5 million of ESSER funds. So the one good thing for COVID is it kept us going a little bit longer. But the cutting of the staff members is why I stand here tonight, because my staff works hard. They work hard. We don't have people sitting around doing nothing. They work very, very hard. And so when we have already cut 50 staff members, if I have a deficit of $3.6 million, and that's what we're going into next year, this year, $3.6 million, that's about 50 employees. I can't cut 50 employees. When you look at the safety of schools, when you look at the class size, our class size, we're already third highest in Hamilton County. Only Oak Hills and Southwest School District has a higher student to teacher ratio. Any metric I could throw at you tonight, it's going to show us in a good light. It's going to show us in a good light financially, okay? It's up to the community to determine, and I would say as the superintendent, I don't want to make any cuts. I'm not here to make any threats. I don't want to make any cuts until I allow the community the opportunity by vote with a levy to say, we don't want you to cut anything. And we're being open and honest about it's 4.9 mils, it raised $4.9 million. We have a $3.6 million deficit, so that leaves you about $1.3 million annually. High school busing is about $500,000, leaves you about what, $800,000, and there's your raises, if you give raises. And so it's pretty tight. We said it's as low as we can go to make it reasonable. It's $14 for every $100,000 of appraised value of your house, and that's on this sheet. If you haven't looked, it's on the website, or if you're lucky enough to watch Facebook Live, we went through it last night too. But it's $14 for every $100,000 per month. So if you have a $300,000 home, that's about $42 a month. Multiply that by 12, that'll give you about $500 a year. So that's the decision that the Loveland community has to make to let me know where these schools are going. I'm pretty proud of where we are. I'm pretty proud of where this community is. I'm pretty proud of where our schools are. I don't want to see it go down. I just don't. We tried to make it as reasonable as possible. I think it's pretty easy to see that if there have to be cuts, 86% of our budget is staffing. That's where it is. So 86% of the budget is staffing, 10% is purchase contracts, which is Hamilton County Educational Service Center, which means that's our school psychologists, occupational therapists, different contracts like that. So now you're at 96%, 4% is what I got left, 3% of that goes to curriculum, 1% is other, which is about $700,000. So we don't have a whole lot of discretionary funding. Well, that's okay, but again, as the superintendent, I would be irresponsible if I didn't tell you that A, these schools are unbelievably good, and B, we got a problem financially. The House Bill 920, I don't want to bore you with it too much, but it's the reason we stand here tonight. House Bill 920 in 1976, George Voinovich said, we're done. If the property values are appraised and they continue to go up, schools are not getting any additional revenue. And the one example I use is in 2014, which is the last time we passed a school levy, that was for 5.6 mils. Let's say you had a $215,000 house and the 5.6 mils raised $421 annually for that house. That makes sense? So you had a $215,000 house, 5.6 mil levy was passed, that's an additional $421 of property tax for that homeowner. This year, 2022, That home is worth about $260,000. We are still getting around $421 for that house. There's appraisals in there that tweak it a little bit, but it's about the same, $421. Therefore, the effective millage is down to 4.6665 for that levy. And I can show you every levy that's been passed since 1976. The one in, I want to say 1983, was passed at 4.9 mils. It's down below 1 effective mill right now. That's why we stand here. People will say, and to me it makes common sense, people will say, hey, my house reappraised at higher, you have to be getting more taxes. To me that makes sense, right? That's why people think, why do you need a levy? It doesn't work that way, and that's the whole problem. And so when people say, when are you going to stop having levies, what's the answer? Never, until the state of Ohio gets this figured out. I don't know what you're going to do. What you try to do is make them as low as possible and extend them as long as you can. And the other issue Loveland has is we are 91% funded by who? All of you. And so that's hard. And we've talked to the state of Ohio legislators. I had 5 legislators in to say this is not okay, what's going on. But at the end of the day, if you're living in a community like Loveland that doesn't have the industrial parks, has a lot of great things, the state of Ohio has said this is how you're going to fund schools. We may not like it, but that's the game. That's where we are right now. And so for me, my responsibility is to make it as low as possible so that we can keep the burden as low as possible, but we can continue to maintain what we're doing. And so I could keep going on and on and on. I don't want it to feel like a Sunday preach here sermon. So I'm going to let you ask any questions you have. And then Andrew, if you have anything, just pop in. Or if you don't have this from the website, Andrew has some copies. So are there any questions, or I can keep going? Alan?
The way you introduced your comments made it sound like the option of giving teachers raises depends on this levy. But in fact, the raises are already built in the contract, right? The school's committed to them.
So the question, and that's a question we got last night also. So Alan's question was, aren't there raises already worked into the contract? And what he's talking about is there are steps in the teacher contract, and then there are raises on a base salary, right? And so the steps work in with the teacher contract. As they gain experience, every year up to a certain point, they will get a step. The industry standard with any school district that you have, minus one that I know it costs them a lot of money to get out of the steps. But the point is the 0% is the 0% on the base. The steps, you are correct, there is a little bit of a tweak, anywhere from 1 to 2% until you get to a certain seniority, and then there is none. But yes, you are correct. Good question. Yes?
What is the student population right now? Is it going up or going down?
Student population, we have bumped up a little bit this year by, I'll have to look at the enrollment. I know our kindergarten is up about 25 students. What happened over COVID is we did drop a little bit, about 300 kids. It did coincide with the 47 staff positions being eliminated, so our class size is kind of balanced out with that. We got lucky with that, I guess. But what you're seeing, and the way I explain Loveland is, it's pretty much a bedroom community, right? There's not much business, and so it's pretty much residential. So when I go out and I speak to different neighborhoods, like some of you were, the way it's working right now, about 10, 15 years, the enrollment was high, probably about 4,500 to 4,700, something like that. It started coming down, and what I would say is we're bouncing back up because you've seen that population get older, move out, and these neighborhoods are starting to turn. So you're starting to see some younger kids in there. But the enrollment right now is about 4,300. Correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew. But
42, 43, somewhere in there.
yeah.
And then did I hear you correctly? It's costing $12,000 to $13,000 per student.
Right.
Okay. And how many years is this levy for?
So the years for the levy, it's what we have said is the 4.9 mil. It will get us out of deficit spend for at least 3 years. So it's at least 3 years. I would love to, as the superintendent, extend it as long as I can, because believe it or not, I don't enjoy all these meetings. I would like it to go as far.
Does it have an end date?
No, it's so the way school levies work, it's called a continuing, so it continues along at 4.9 mils. What happens is the effective millage goes down. So your school districts in the state of Ohio very rarely are going to do a renewal. They're going to do what's called a continuing. Some people are calling it a permanent, and that's just how the schools are funded. The state of Ohio is the only state that has this. They're the only state that does not have an inflationary adjustment in the funding. That is why we stand here. If House Bill 920 was not there, we would not be standing here. That means we would have gotten an inflationary adjustment. Anything else? I'll give you one more thing that kind of pops into my mind. I think people, well, why does it have to be permanent? The way I relate it is, let's say it's your job to get a 3% raise. Okay, cost of inflation adjustment 3%. Are they ever going to take that 3% away from you when you get a raise? Probably not, right? They're probably not going to take that away. So with the 4.9, if it were, let's say it was 3 years and it's going to renew at 3 years, you go for 4.9, that's gone. If that renewal passes, you're great. But have you had an inflationary adjustment after that? You haven't. So to say it's going to stay at 4.9 for 3 years and drop and put it back on, you haven't had an inflationary adjustment at all. And that's what levies are for, is to give you an inflationary adjustment. It's unfortunate the state of Ohio is set up this way. I can tell you, unfortunate in my view. If you look at Pennsylvania, what they do is the local Board of Education will figure out what they think they need for that next school year. They'll go to the State Board of Education. They either stamp it or don't stamp it. They'll say, okay, you get a 2% adjustment. It's automatically assessed to the property homeowners. So if you look at property taxes in Pennsylvania as an example, they're pretty high. And so when I say the state of Ohio is the only state that doesn't have the inflationary adjustment, it's pretty amazing. It's 40 years ago, this method was determined unconstitutional and they haven't changed it. And so we get to stand here and say, district and community, let's figure out how we want to fund these schools. And there's other states that they just keep clicking along. If George Voinovich 40 years ago could have said, you know what, if you get 10% increase in property appraisals, we're going to cap it at 2%. If I had 2% every year, I can run a school district. I'm not standing here. To have 0 for 8 years, I hate to say it, but I've been on a fixed income for 8 years. And when you have inflation that it just keeps going, it's pretty tough to do that and give people raises.
Yeah, well, and again, one thing I'm having trouble.
Sure.
We're going to be honest tonight, right? First dialogue. I disagree with everybody should get an increase on it. So the way it works in my life, I don't get a cost of living increase. I haven't had anything in 5 years. I reset every year with the company, and I have to earn it through new business. So this mentality of the government, the schools, that we deserve, I don't fall in line with that. So I struggle with that part of it, okay? The second thing I struggle with, I have 7 children, of which some of them, I put them through private, and I put them through public. We lived in Illinois, okay? And I'm having a hard time understanding why it's costing $12,000 to $13,000 for you to educate a student here in Loveland. When I was in Chicago at a private school, and it was costing me at that point about $6,500. So I've never understood. My mom was a school teacher for 55 years.
Sure.
Had lots of discussion. What my concern is, the other thing too is when you have permanent levies, there's no accountability. And this just continues to go on and on, okay? And I'm not here tonight for me. I'm gonna make it. I'm in my 60s. I'm worried about my youngest child who's a freshman in high school. I'm worried about my 13 grandchildren. And what you're putting into motion is something that's not sustainable. And whether I vote for this or not, or anybody in this room, we are just setting up that this is not going to be sustainable at some point. The other thing is, I'm watching the city. I'm watching a whole other housing development over here being put up. And they're refusing to take some of this land and put in what I call corporate tax revenue building businesses. And when I don't see anything happening here, I can't vote yes for this. I'm sorry. I
No, it's
can't.
okay.
And I came here tonight because I wanted to first of all see how you're different, because I also got, we moved here in 2013, and so I had the previous administration to look at the traffic. I mean, just, that was a shit show, excuse my language. And you've got a tremendous road ahead of you here to change a lot of minds of people that saw the dishonesty, borderline corruption that was going on in that administration. And I think until you show me a reduction in the costs, changing the mentality that teachers and everybody deserves cost of living raises, because why? I don't know. I don't buy that. I'm old school, work for it. The other thing I'm having a hard time understanding is the accountability. When you put this in and you say it's forever, when the next one's forever, guess what? My grandkids won't even be able to live here because the house is going to be $1.5 million. So until I see you putting more of an effort in to cutting your costs and showing me that you're coming from that side, it's really difficult for me to jump on board.
Fair enough. So there's a lot there, but I'll do my best. First of all, it's not my problem. This is Loveland's problem. This is the community. Mike Broadwater is the superintendent. I'm telling you where we are. I'm just being honest. The revenues are not there to sustain what we have. And so when you don't have the revenues, so I guess my first question to you would be, when I say there are 607 school districts in the state of Ohio, we are 561st in revenues. What emotion does that elicit from you? The other 93%.
The question is why are we getting that low revenue? Why is that revenue? Why are we getting that low revenue?
Because levies have not been passed.
What's that?
Because levies have not been passed. In 8 years, we have not had an operating budget. That's the only way I get revenue.
But my taxes have continually been going up, right? And I get what you were saying about, they're not taking one, so they're not going and keeping up with that, taking money from those increasing taxes. I agree with you, it's not your problem, but you're the leader, so it is your problem.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah, exactly. I give you kudos for that, right? And I will tell you that just listening to you tonight, you come across as a genuine person, and that was needed, believe me, okay? So congratulations that they brought somebody in like yourself, okay? But I come back to this mentality of raises, and again, I want people in this room to understand. One of my sons went to public high school. He got into West Point. Okay, I have another son that went to a private school, and he struggled to make anything happen. Right? It's what you make of it.
100%.
Okay, I don't care where you go to school. It's what you make of it. 100%. And what I'm trying to understand about the Loveland school system is why is it just granted? You've got to have busing. I was in a district where we drove our kids to school. We had to pay for extracurricular activity. Okay, if my son wanted to be in the band in grade school or wanted to be in these things, we had to pay fees. I have that situation with my youngest right now. I'm paying hundreds of dollars in fees. I just got done paying for his golf. Now we're paying for the swimming. Next, I got the throwing the disc. I got the band. I got the choir. I'm paying for all of that out of pocket. I think that has to be. If I could see something, that's what I'm saying. I'm just looking for something.
What's your first name?
John.
John. These are good questions. So the I'll do that since you just asked that. The extracurriculars for athletics, each athlete has to pay $300 per sport. There's no cap, no family cap. There's no, if Johnny plays 2 sports, a break. Johnny plays 3 sports, he's paying $900. That is the highest charge in Hamilton County for parents. The highest charge by far. When you look at Butler County, we're not the highest, there's one maybe. So we have done that. When you look at expenditures per pupil, so we say 12 or 13,000, you said it could have been less. Private schools sometimes have less salary constrictions. They don't have special education requirements that we do, which takes a lot of resources. But even our expenditures per pupil, let's just look at Hamilton County, John, right? In Hamilton County, there's 22 school districts, okay? We are 20th in expenditures per pupil. So this is the state funding, I'll agree with you, it is a problem. It's not a Loveland problem, except for the fact that 91% of our revenue comes from the taxpayer. That's the problem. Do I believe it's sustainable? In my lifetime, this is year 36 for me. I have said every time I go through these levies, and I hate them, but every time, this is probably my 15th to 20th levy, we've tried to define House Bill 920 and why it works, and I've always said, well, this can't possibly keep going on like this. We can't possibly, my entire year this, John, how much education do you think I'm leading versus trying to get funds for our kids? That's what I'm doing all year, is this, trying to just do what we want to do for kids. When you say, why do we have to worry about cost of living adjustments? Our teaching staff the last 2 years took 0% on the base. Did they get the steps they did, which is 1% to 2% or none, depending where they're at on the pay scale. Their salaries, when you look at masters and where they are in the world, I would say their salaries aren't necessarily commensurate with the experience they have, but that's my opinion because I'm a teacher. But I guess I would ask you, how would you do it? Okay? And you know we have teachers associations, you have classified associations, so we've got constraints, and all your public school districts have constraints, and we try and work as tight as we possibly can within those constraints. I can tell you the 2 associations I work with have been phenomenal. They understand where we are, they understand the taxpayers of Loveland are paying 91%. I'm going to give you, I like these questions and I hope I'm getting to them, but I'm going to give you another stat that should upset the taxpayers of Loveland, okay? State funding model. The state funding model is based predominantly on the wealth of that district, okay? Loveland is considered a wealthy district, so we're in the top 10% of wealth. Like it or not, we're a wealthy district. The good news is we're a wealthy district. The bad news is we're a wealthy district, so the state of Ohio is not going to fund us like they fund other school districts. And you're probably aware of that. And so we are, at the guarantee, we receive about $3,000 per student from the state of Ohio. There are other school districts that are rural, urban, that have lower socioeconomic. They're getting $10,000 to $15,000 per student. Remember I said that one school district had $45,000 per student? That's your money. That's taxpayer money. And so for me, I understand, well, let me give you the stat I was going to. So the way they develop the state funding model, they say Loveland's wealthy. They should be able to pay this much in property tax, and we'll give them this much to educate the kids. So they gave us $3,000. They're saying right now on the CUP report, line 39, you can look it up, that the taxpayers in Loveland are only paying 62.5% of the taxes for schools that they can afford. That's what, you'll see 0.625, they'll say the Loveland taxpayers are not supporting the schools like the state funding model says they can. Do I think that's okay? Heck no, I don't. I know our taxpayers are paying a lot, but that's why I'm telling you the state funding model is messed up. And that's why it's hard for this, I'm sorry, I'm standing over here. That's why it's hard for this district, because people are being stretched. So my responsibility, the last 2 operating levies, bond levies, whatever they were, this one is lower than that, and we're 8 years later. The reason we were able to do that is because 50 staff members were cut, and we got ESSER funds. We had about $5 million in ESSER funds. So I go back to you and I would say, how would you, teachers have families, right? 50% of our staff lives in Loveland. 50% of our staff lives in Loveland. So if this levy passes, guess what those staff members are doing? They're paying this levy, right? And so they may not even see an adjustment if they get the raise, you know what I mean? They're gonna have to pay those property taxes also. But that's why we do get COLAs. That's why Social Security last year gave a 5.9% COLA to their recipients. This year they'll probably get 10% because people are understanding that things are costing more. And I don't know if I'm just rambling, John. But
Have you put any thought into, let's say we pass this, you turn me into a yes vote tonight, we all passed it.
I'm okay with that.
How many years, you've got to be doing your forecast out past the next 36 months. When are we going to, how long are we going to have to be able to go without another levy in front of us? What's your gut? Is it 4 years, 5 years?
Well, when I say something, I get quoted, but I got a gut feeling. I say 3 years because it gets us out of the deficit spending. I believe I can manage it I can't manage how the state funding is going to change, and that seems to change worse every time. So in that case, it's like me saying a gallon of milk's $1.97 now, what's it going to be in 5 years? That it's hard to figure that out. So, and it never gets better. But what we did this year, when you look at how are we curbing costs, we have a veteran staff. Okay, so we have an older staff, and when they retire, what we have said, what I told my HR director is, we're only going to hire those kids coming out of college or 1 or 2 years experience. Why is that? Because there's a huge delta between retirement and entry level. And so this year alone, we saved $600,000 that way. So this year, $600,000, it'll be maybe $500,000 the next year, right? Because they get experience, and then $400,000. But this year again, at the end of this year, we will do the same thing. So that's real money. The way I'll save real money is staffing, because that's really the majority of my budget is staffing. And what this levy is for is just to keep the staffing where we are, and I put 5 FTEs, five teachers, in case the enrollment does go up. Every year I don't use that FTE, or every year that we cannot get high school busing in because we can't find the drivers, it's pushing, right? And that's my goal, John, would be to not have to see you for about 5 or 6 years in this setting, but I can't promise that at all. What I can tell you is the 3 years, I know we can get out of the deficit spending, and then it's up to me to do what we say we're doing, but then also try and push it as far as we can. Do I think this system is sustainable? Right now, I don't get to make that rule. I try and make it as low as I can. The state of Ohio, it's been unconstitutional for 40 years, and I've done many of these meetings. It's frustrating to me because it's hard to explain, and I don't think. So you look at your home. I have 5 kids. Okay, so we had 4 in college. So we had budget stuff going all over the place. The way I budget the best is smaller increments at a time. Small increments at a time. So okay, it's gone up 2%. All right, what are we going to do? We're going to Ruby Tuesday instead of the precinct this year. You can chunk it along. When you have high millage levies, that's hard on families. And so to go back to permanent versus renewal, the 4.9, okay, that's $14 for 100,000. So you got a $500,000 house, you got $70, right, per month, $840 a year. It's real money. It's budgetable money in some families. But if you go for 4.9 for 3 years and then you take that away, well, we've just lost all that revenue, so we got to catch back up on the renewal, which is 4.9. But if I want an inflationary adjustment, maybe I need another 2 mils for that inflationary adjustment. So I kind of facetiously asked at the beginning, when will levies stop? It's frustrating when the answer is what? Not until they change this state funding law. And so what my responsibility is in Loveland is to make sure we keep it as low as possible. You have other districts that don't have to do it as, so your rural district, do you think they're complaining about the state funding law? Probably not, right? Because they're getting state, but they're not complaining about it. So state legislators, oh, they're happy, it must be okay. There are 37 other districts in the state of Ohio that pay a higher percent of property tax towards schools than us, out of 607. So we're in the top, 5% of what we pay. So I get it. And that's why it's my responsibility to keep it as low as possible, extend it as far as I can. It would do me no good, John, to stand here and say something and then not do it. Because I know at some point in the future, we're going to have another conversation. It'd be great if it was 10 years from now. That'd be great. If the state funding model changes and they give us more state money per student, that would be great. If they gave us COVID money every year, that would be great. We wouldn't have to do this. So it really is. And the other thing I'll say is, when I say it's not a Mike Broadwater problem, it's something I have to solve, but it's all of our problems, right? Because this is our community. This is where we live. If these schools, and I'm telling you, these schools will not look the same if I have to cut staff, right? Because we already cut 50 staff, that's 10% of my staff. If I have to cut 50 more, 20%, I can't do that. I can't cut 20% of my staff and expect that we're going to get the same academics that we have right now. So the community here has a big opportunity to tell me what they value in their schools. But I also say the reason you came to Loveland is to live in a nice community that has a nice school district, that has police, that has fire. This community is awesome. This is the best community I've ever worked in. I know the state funding leans on the property, the homeowners, but I also know they get a pretty good bang for their buck as well. And so, I don't know if I answered all your questions or not. Alan?
I'm going to be facetious with you for a minute. I'm going to make a serious point. Because you were talking a few minutes ago about how 50% of the teachers live on Loveland. If this levy passes, they're going to wind up paying their increase essentially to pay our property.
Right. Well, not all of it, but yeah.
Well, not all of it.
Yeah.
But suppose we don't pass the levy, they still have their salary and their $64, right? Because they don't have the tax burden if we don't pass.
They're even Steven for a little bit, so you can't stay even Steven for 10 years, right?
Well.
That's why, well, go ahead.
But my serious point is this.
Yeah.
All right. And I'll state it metaphorically. Suppose being in the 98th percentile, as we are for academics, means you can go to Johnny and Carlos for dinner. But when the bill comes, you can't pay the bill. Somewhere, there has to be a realistic assessment of what this entire community can afford. And it's nice to know now that the state of Columbus thinks that I'm only paying 61% of the taxes that I can afford to pay, but I don't see it that way.
Nor do I, but that's what I'm working with.
I understand that as the taxpayer, I got to work with it too. And sometimes you can't get the goal, you can't get the rules right, so you got to settle for what you can reasonably afford.
So 100%, so what did I say is coming if we don't have the additional revenue?
Cuts.
And where the cut's going to be? What's that?
Staff.
Okay.
Where the money is.
Right. So if the Loveland community on November 8th tells me we're okay if you cut staff members, even though we've got one of the highest student per teacher ratio, we are 20th out of 22 in administrative expenditures per pupil. Any metric I can give you, we are below average in finances, above average in academics. Every single one that I can think of. Alan, I hear what you're saying. I will say that's not a Mike Broadwater solution. I hear what you're saying. I can't solve the state funding model. I can work within it and try and be realistic with what we ask.
But the problem actually is larger than the school district. It's really the entire deal. Getting back to John's point, Loveland needs more businesses if it wants to play it that way.
Yeah, I can't solve that.
I know.
All I want to do is educate kids. And I'm telling the community, this is what I need just to keep doing what I'm doing. I hear what you're saying. I can't solve that. I do believe that when I go around and do all these talks, I've never heard these schools are horrible. I've never heard you guys don't do a great job. Everybody says you do a great job. We love your teachers. It's all awesome. You kind of got to pay what you get for it, and you got to keep it as low as possible. I understand what happened in the past. It's a cop-out when I say I wasn't here, but I wasn't here. I don't know what happened. But I'm telling you, we would like to take care of our kids. We want to take care of our kids. And that's where the community is going to have to tell me, are we going to cut staff or we're not going to cut staff? That's essentially what we're asking, right? The busing, when you say high school busing, it's empirically easy to say we don't need it unless you're the superintendent who gets to sit with the families who have the hardship and can't figure out how to get their kids to school. I had a family come in over the summer. They moved into Loveland, sat down with them, said, hey, we're great, we're excited to have you. Where do you live? All that good stuff. And they said, well, how do we figure out when our kids are going to get to the bus stop? And we're, well, they go to high school, right? And we don't have high school busing. Well, we both work. How are we going to get the kids to school? And so it's easy for us who don't have that hardship to say it's not a hardship. We have some families that is a hardship. $500,000 is about 1% of our budget. but it's also going to be difficult to find drivers. So that 500,000, we just did a resolution with the Board of Education. I'm not touching the 500,000 except for busing. And so if we can't offer high school busing, it's going to be a line item where you can see where it's sitting so that we're not touching it. I don't need it. It's for high school busing. So there are people that will say high school busing is a want. I would say it's a need because I'm a teacher, and that's just me. But anyway, other questions? Yes.
So if you say you cut staff, like what does it look like? Higher class to teacher ratio, or are you limiting programs?
Yeah. So the question is, when you cut staff, what's that look like? And the obvious answer is staff, right? So we said staff. What that looks like is our student to teacher ratio is 21.4 right now. And it's, like I said, it's the third highest in Hamilton County. And what will happen is, if you look, let's break it down in, well, three categories. You have your classified, which are bus drivers, paras, and all the support people. You have teachers, you have administrators, okay? So classified, I don't have anybody to cut in classified. I can't find food service workers. I can't find bus drivers. I can't find, because we're down on all of those areas. So there's nothing to cut there because we're already down and we can't find those employees. So now you have teachers and administrators. When you look at our building administrators, we are understaffed, but we're fine, we're doing okay. We don't have a whole lot of fat when you talk about the building administrators. So you have one administrator at LECC, you have one administrator at LPS, you have two at LES, you have, where am I at? LIS, you have two. At LMS, you have three, and then at the high school, you have four. And you've got a lot of kids in those buildings. And so those are the individuals keeping kids safe, making sure we're doing what we're doing. In central office, you have myself, you have a treasurer, you have an HR director. Is there a coordinator underneath the HR director in a large district? We do not. It's all GAR. We have a special education director. Is there a coordinator underneath Jesse Coles? There is not. He's doing all the special education, and that is a large job. We have a teaching and learning assistant superintendent. Is there anybody underneath her helping her? There is not. The central office administrators, if we have to cut, there's going to have to be administrators in central office. I'm telling you, other than me, there's not a whole lot of fat, but we would have to figure it out. The issue is, you're just going to get to teachers, because administratively, when you're talking about $3.6 million, if I get rid of 3 administrators, you haven't even put a chink in that, right? It's just not that much. And classified, I can't get rid of. So the teaching staff, what'll happen is we have an unbelievable AP program, advanced placement program in the high school. We have all sorts of, we lost our gifted coordinator with the last round of cuts, but there's still gifted coordination that gets done. You're going to lose a lot of those ancillary programs, okay? And that's just where it's going to be. There's going to come to a point where you cannot cut yourself out of a deficit spend. You can't cut enough staff members to get out of a deficit spend. And the perfect example is 2 years ago, what did we do? We cut 47 staff members, right? Well, here we are. Why is that? So we cut 47 staff members, you still have 500 staff members left. Well, what's happening there? You have cost of living adjustment, okay? So if you cut 50 more, maybe it staves off 2 or 3 years again, but you're right back, and then you've hurt the academic programs in the meantime. And our academic programs, gang, we are doing well. I am very proud of where I told our staff at Convocation, we're the best public school district in the state of Ohio. And then the report card came back, what are we? We're the best public school district in the state of Ohio. So I'm very proud of that. I don't want to chink away at that. We don't have a lot of extra programs. There's a teacher in here that's upset that a program was eliminated because we had to move different things. We didn't add FTEs. And so it ultimately, I know it sounds sanctimonious, I got in this to help kids. I didn't get in to talk finances, but I'm a math guy and I love finances. But I got in this to help kids. We're going to hurt kids. We're going to hurt kids. And you might say, well, it's just teachers, it's just staff members, they can find another job. it's not about that. It's about the program we're offering for kids. We don't have any gifted programming. Go into our primary school and our elementary school, okay? So you have 4 grades. There used to be a library for both of those buildings, okay? You know what we got now? We got one small library that was put together by a paraprofessional. Do you know what kind of media center specialists we have in there that's certified, that's doing all sorts of great programs for our kids? Not a single one. We don't have any. We have no media center specialist that's helping the kids at the elementary level. And I get a little passionate about the education because it's been chiseled away here a little bit, and we're still working hard, and we're still doing great things for kids. So I get the finances of it all, but I also get the education. And we're trying to be as reasonable as possible. I apologize for getting passionate. Yes.
So I know you like to pick on House Bill 920, but I want to be fair.
I hate House Bill 920.
Well, House Bill 920 was designed to protect people
It was.
from their taxes rising that they didn't vote for.
It was.
Now, I talked to Jean Schmidt today, and she was telling me about House Bill 1 because the formula for funding in Loveland did not take into account the fact that we have little business revenue. It was all about where a rich district or people can afford to pay. She said that is not the case anymore, that they have changed the formula. Are you telling me she wasn't correct?
The formula's been changed. It did not go to Loveland's
But we
benefit.
didn't lose money either, and I know we were worried about losing money. The only people who lost money were Claremont workers. And they could at least afford to lose money.
Right. Do you know why we didn't lose any? Because we're already at the bottom. We're at the guarantee. So we're already there. What House Bill 920, Leslie brings up a good point. If you look at the property values and how they have, you've done well. If you bought in Loveland 20 years ago, you're probably pretty happy, right? It's gone up pretty well. And I've said in another meeting, if it went up 25%, does the school district need 25%? No, we'd be giving money back by that. What I don't understand, and I'll just get on my soapbox, Leslie, is why couldn't you have put a cap at 2%? So when the appraisals go, just give us 2%. Every district, 2%. So it's just like your home budget. I can't budget when my revenue is flat and costs keep going up. I keep chipping away, and at some point, there's nothing left to chip away that's not going to hurt my family, which is my school. So I don't understand why there can't be some slight inflationary adjustment for school districts. And we wouldn't have district people and community people getting upset when we're all good people and we all love this community, and the state of Ohio sits up there and goes, well, that's what it is. It is what it is. And so I'll get off my soapbox. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that you understand, that everybody understands that money is locked into your house. Just because somebody tells you it's worth more, it's not worth more until you sell it. It could go up, it could go down. Just because it is appreciated by the auditor doesn't mean it whole beans to people who are going to save it.
Yeah. So Linda's point is such that there are individuals, if you're retired and your house has gone from 200 to 400,000, you're not going to realize that because you don't want to move. You want to stay in your house. Your income hasn't come up, so you might be a little bit more richer with your property value than you are with your income. I don't have a good answer for that, other than what I keep saying. That we're all playing by the same rules here. Every school district in the state of Ohio is playing by the same rules. If you look at the district I left, which is Forest Hills, they're right there. It's the same district. It's a rich district, wealthy district, and they're hurt. And so when you look at some of your rural districts, they don't have a problem with this. But, yeah.
There's nothing on here anywhere, nor have I seen anywhere written that you're thinking about raises.
About what?
Raises for the teachers. There's nothing on here about raises for the teachers. So are you going to give them a raise at this level?
It's on the back. Does it give you 86%? Is it 85% to keep doing what we're doing?
Maintain current education.
Right. That's what we're going to try and do. We also have something out on the website that shows 86% of our budget is staffing.
So that's supposed to be we're supposed to know that that means that you're going to get the
That's why you're sitting here, I'm telling you, right? So there's also information on the website that says 86% of our budget is staffing. It'll stay that way. If there's more revenue and there's a bump, a 1 or 2% raise, then we're going to keep it at 86%. So,
Well, also, when you give a 1 or 2% raise, that's not just on the base pay. Every single step and every single amount raises as well.
which
So,
amounts to, if it's 1% increase on the base, it's a 1% increase,
everywhere.
which is still 1%. 1% is 1%. John?
Can you help me understand something here? I hear so many different numbers. I hear there's a surplus, you addressed it briefly. I couldn't tell if you said there's a surplus of 3.6 million. What is, I hear so many different numbers.
I'm sorry.
What is the surplus? Is there a law in Ohio that says you have to keep a certain number of surplus? And so when you have a surplus, is there a level of that surplus, whatever that number is, that you're willing to come down in it to help fund some of this? What is, help educate me on the surplus?
So I'll try and,
I have a hard time with that one.
I'll try and limit numbers, but the 3.6 million is the deficit, okay? So we're in a deficit spend of $3.6 million this year. I think it's 3.7 next year. The way the school funding works, John, is the property taxes that are raised get plopped in January. So what you'll see is like a $14 million cash balance. It's kind of like your payday. And then payday, what happens to your cash balance? You start paying your bills, so you get to June, you're down to about, I think it's 5 or 6 million. Then you get another set of revenue so that you can make it through the second half. So to your question, there's not, the state would recommend that you keep 10%, but there's not anything there in writing. The 14 million, it's a misnomer in my mind, because when I get paid, I feel like I'm rich until I pay my bills 2 days later, and that cash balance just goes. The other thing is, John, if I would say running a house, how many months do you want to have in reserve in case something happens? A lot of people say 3 or 4 months of reserve. That's $14 million.
Okay, so here's what I'm getting clarity on.
Yeah.
What you're telling me then is, I'm thinking on a cash flow basis, all bills are paid, all the cash has been collected. There truly is not a $3.6 million. There isn't $3.6 million sitting in an account that doesn't have to be spent anywhere. You're saying
That's the deficit.
Yeah, so that you're referring to the deficit. But what I'm hearing in the community is you've got a 3.6 million surplus.
No. I think what you're hearing, you'll hear, I said the 14 million because that's what you'll see in January.
But it's your the way the timing on it is, it's kind of like you got 14 million, you still have to pay the bills. So the 3.6 million, what you're telling me, if I'm make sure I'm hearing this correctly, you're telling me that you're actually 3.6 million behind.
My expenditures are exceeding my revenues by 3.6.
Right, so you got the 14 whatever million or whatever, but when you end up paying all your bills, you're actually in a deficit of 3.6.
Well, there's cash balance. We're in a deficit spend of 3.6 million.
Right.
So by the end of this year, your cash balance is going to be down, and
Because you
then
haven't gotten the funding for the upcoming.
right. So to that, I'll give you an example. So when the levy passes in November of 22 of this year, the property taxes we will realize in January of 23. If it doesn't pass November, let's say we put it up in May or November of next year, because at some point you need revenue, you don't get those tax until January of 24, which means not only have you had a $3.6 million deficit, you're also digging into the next year's deficit. I kind of explain it like you're using your credit card to pay your credit card. At some point, your cash balance is gone. What we're trying to do is run this business appropriately, not run it to where you have a deficit spend and no cash balance.
So what's your plan on that? That's a great point. What are you going to try to do to change this 3.6 million deficit and bring it back to zero?
Well, I think it's in conjunction. You have two choices. You either cut expenditures, 3.6 million, or that's why you ask for revenues, so that you can you can adjust. So the 3.6 million deficit, what I can tell you is we're not looking to add. We have high school busing and maybe 5 people over 3 years if it grows. But what I'm saying is $3.6 million, John. That's over 50 employees, which means I've now cut 20% of my staff. That's all I don't have anything left to cut for the most part. That's where your largest cut is. So what am I doing? The hiring practice gave us $600,000. Okay, that's a real number. So what I would like to do is keep us where we are, have the levy pass, work for the next 3 years to continue to do that, to keep pushing the next. I don't want to do another levy for as long as I have to, but keep pushing it as far as we can without hurting our kiddos. And at some point, you know, I hate to say this, but it's true, and if you talk to your realtors, it's true. Show me a great community that has below average schools, or show me a great school district that has a below average community. They seem to be pretty symbiotic. And so it's a community taking care of a community, doing it in a reasonable fashion as much as we can. And so it ends up, me as a superintendent, asking our community, what do you want this to look like? Do you want us to cut into the staff that we've already cut into? Or do you want us just to maintain the 5 out of 5 on the report card and keep doing what we're doing? And I think I can manage it because we have a veteran staff. As they retire, we keep the hiring practices going.
So if this bill, if we pass this, we all walk out of here tonight and
Sure.
we pass it, is your commitment that you're going to try to eliminate the deficit spending in the next 36 months?
100%, yes.
Okay.
With the additional revenue, I would love to, well, I don't want to sound like a politician. Yes.
And you know why, and you've been able to research since you've been here and understand, because I really don't know, how did you get into this deficit spending?
Because does inflation happen? Yeah, okay. So we haven't had additional revenues for 8 years. So I don't know what corporation you're in, but if your revenues have stayed the same for 8 years, inflation hasn't stopped, right? Inflation's going. So we've been able to push it off. King's Local's putting up a six.
So hold on.
Yeah,
What you're saying is this deficit is all inflation. Over the last 8 years, most of this deficit, so it's not, it isn't irresponsible spending. You're saying it's inflationary, because I'm understanding what you're saying. I just want to make sure I'm hearing this right, because if I vote for this, I don't want any excuses at the end of this 3 years of why there's more deficit spending. You're saying that is accumulated over 8 years. You didn't get any levies passed for 8 years, or whatever it says in the pamphlet. Inflation's been going up, and that deficit spending is inflationary.
Yeah. So if you were to look at what the inflation percentage is over those 8 years versus what our expenditures have been, what percentage, we are way below inflationary rate. Now, I don't know what happened in the past. I can't promise you what happened in the past. I know there's some things. What I can promise you is I don't like this, and I'm certainly not going to stand here again having not done what I told you I was going to do. And so, will I get out of the deficit spend for 3 years? I certainly will. And then I would love to be standing here after 5, 6, 7 years before we even have to talk like this again. And that's going to come down to staffing. I will tell you, it comes down, if the state funding model gets better, maybe we could push it off longer. I've never seen it get better in a wealthy district. They just keep saying you got to pay more. And that's where.
And are you doing anything to work with the leadership of the city? You know, and this really brings to the point tonight.
In the leadership of the state?
Of the city of Loveland,
Oh.
right? Like, you know, people ask, you're going to go home tonight and say, that guy wouldn't shut up, but I'm here tonight because I really don't know any of the stuff.
You're why I'm here, Jim. That's why we're doing it.
But what I'm trying to understand is, are you, since you're the superintendent of schools, have you forged begun to forge a relationship with the leadership of this city to get them to understand how important it is for them to stop building giving permits out for additional housing, and take some of the remaining land that's left and put in responsible corporate? I'm not talking putting in a plant that spews out, you know, toxins, okay, because everyone gets all. I'm talking about corporate P&G offices. You know, I'm talking very little wear and tear on the community.
Yeah.
If they don't do something like that and we don't hold them accountable, we don't vote people in that are going to take a look at that kind of a master plan. I don't know, maybe I don't even know if it exists, but it doesn't appear to be, because everywhere I'm driving around, I got roads that they don't support this housing project over here. It's just 2-lane, barely held together, and I got all these other houses going on. So are you putting together a relationship with them to try to help them understand, from your point of view, this isn't sustainable to keep coming back to the homeowners of this community for a levy every 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is. You have absolutely got to get off your butts and put together a master plan to bring in a tax base tied to corporations moving into the community with offices.
Yeah. So 2 thoughts there. One, I have gotten to know Mayor Bailey very well. I met her for coffee last week in the morning and met with I forget his name, but the vice president as well, explaining how the state funding works. And they have an idea, but unfortunately it's so convoluted, even a lot of individuals just don't understand it. But I've met with them, David Kennedy, the city manager. I know David very, very well. I've met with him numerous times. I'm on the Chamber of Commerce. I'm on the board of directors for the Chamber of Commerce, so always looking for new commerce. What we have right now for commerce, John, is what? A lot of restaurants. We get a lot of restaurants downtown, but what you're talking about is real money, which is your P&G offices and so forth. And so it's a very good point. I think I've forged in a year and a half, I've forged a very good relationship with them to just keep saying, let's keep looking, and then let's not give away too many school taxes in the meantime. The other part is, I did bring in those 5 legislators that I talked about. Brad Wenstrup, I don't know if I mentioned it or not. I brought in 5 legislators, sorry. Brad Wenstrup, Tom Brinkman, Steve Shabbat, Scott Lips, Jessica Miranda, all five individual meetings, had them come in, see our kids, had them come in and see our 1940 elementary, and gave them manila folders and said, hey, what do you think about our finances? Can you help us out a little bit? Tom Brinkman was the only one who I felt like recognized that we had a problem, but then he was able to walk out the door and just, so for me, what I would love to do, A, is pass this levy, and then B, take the people that are passionate no's and passionate yeses and everybody in between. Why can't we get together and go up? It's at the state level, and we have 37 other school districts that are in the same boat as us, where it's 91%. There's one district, I don't want to misquote it, but they're at 95 or higher, 95% of the property tax for schools. So that's high. But I have very good relationships throughout the state of Ohio with superintendents as well. There's got to be a way that, back to what Leslie said, if you could just give me a 2% inflationary adjustment every year, John, I'm golden. And I think families can kind of go with that until you hit some sort of economic turn. But I think it would be realistic in my mind if we could just have something that would help us adjust. To have the same revenues for 8 years, that's pretty tough in a $50 million corporation. That's pretty tough. And you have to pay people. We don't give 3, 4, 5% raises. We give 2%. The base might be 1 or 2. We're not talking about outrageous raises. Teachers work hard, staff work hard. I think everybody knows that. What's realistic is what we're trying to land on, right? What's realistic? I've been on that side a lot.
Well, I might chime in. Okay, so you said revenues have been flat for 8 years.
For the most part.
Okay, so I'm going to think then property taxes have probably been flat. I haven't gone back and looked. I haven't.
For your schools, it has. So I don't know if you live in Hamilton County or not, or Claremont, or where you live, but the example, I don't know if I have the sheet or not, but Hamilton County, for example, 2014 is the last school levy that passed. It was 5.6 mils. In Hamilton County, we added up from 2014 to now, renewals and new levies, 17 or 20 new issues have passed since we've passed one. So sometimes people will look at their property taxes and say, hey, they're going up, the school should have money. You have to really pay attention to where it's going. To get into the reappraisals, I can get into it kind of deep and then I give a lot of numbers, but at the end of the day, so Hamilton County is going to have a reassessment next year, right? And let's say the average home in Hamilton County in Loveland City Schools goes up 7%. So if your house goes up 8%, where you're up a little bit, instead of that $421 I said you were paying, you might be paying $425. It's a little slight adjustment. But for every house that bumps up, there's another house that bumps down because we're still getting the same. And so if you see it change a little, it's because there's been a reappraisal, but it's a reappraisal that we still get the same revenue. It's not going to affect. It's not a big effect on what you're saying. But if you got onto if you went to the county auditor, we've got those links on the website. You could see all that information. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, just having lived here, for over 20 years, I understand we're a bedroom community. I like that, and I'm just trying to gauge that over time things are going to cost more, so property taxes could rise. I'm looking in the one in 2019 which didn't pass, but that operating levy was 6.9. We're only dealing with a 4.9 here. Costs have gone up over the 3 years. If we haven't raised our taxes in 8 years, I mean, just kind of on a macro level, I understand we're going to have a levy. It's just a matter of what is a suitable one. And just in my opinion, 4.9 sounds a lot more palatable than other ones we've had before. And we're talking about something that's almost 3 years later than when we voted on that operating levy back in early 2020. So just for what it's worth, my mindset is at some point we support the schools. A lot of us, that I know in the room have had kids that have gone through the school systems. Some of us no longer have kids in the school systems. My youngest graduated from high school last year, but we want to see people have the same advantages that our kids had. So I think at a macro level, you're going to get a lot of support for an operating levy. It's just a matter of explaining the need, which I think you're doing a good job of, and that the operating levy, for me, it's not the same that we were talking about 2 and 3 years ago.
Yeah. And I appreciate that viewpoint. I look at it, let's say all the education aside, your home, for many of you, is your largest investment, right? That's your largest, mine is, that's my largest investment. I put about $500 worth of mulch down every year so that I can make sure that my community and everything looks nice and we take care of it. So even if you don't even think about the educational piece, this is an investment into your community. It is an investment into your kids. And I know everybody in this room loves kids and wants to take care of them. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is I'm trying to be as honest with you as possible. I have nothing to hide. I have nothing to gain. I hate doing this. I'm telling you, our schools have not had new funding for 8 years. We've kept it at the minimum to get out of this deficit spend and just keep doing what we're doing. If you notice in the literature, we said we would add 5 FTEs if needed, okay? 2 the first year, 2 the second year, 1 the third year. I would ask you to look at any other school district's levy literature. Kings is doing a 6.4 mil levy. Their last operating levy passed 6 years ago. Kettering is doing 5.9. I think it's Talawanda's doing 5.7. We're below all those. We're better. Our report card's better. I want to say the person. Our report card's better. And so the investment, in my mind, you do get a bang for your buck. And we try to keep it as minimal as possible to continue to do what we do. And you are investing in your community. Yes.
Just to be clear, you did get $5 million worth of investment.
Yeah, that's it.
And there is $3.8 million every year for a permanent improvement fund as well.
Yeah.
And nowhere on here does it also mention the 1.59 contingency fund line item that is currently kind of bringing us to that deficit spend.
So 3 things there. Number 1 was the ESSER funds I mentioned. We got $5 million. We did mention that. You mentioned something else too.
Permanent improvement.
Yeah, the PI fund, what Linda's, Yeah, what Linda's mentioning is the permanent improvement fund. PI fund is what we call it. It's a $3.1 million a year. What that goes, it has to be earmarked for facilities. And so when you look at our facilities, I think we've maintained them pretty well with the age they are. You cannot use those funds for salaries or anything. It's got to be earmarked for certain
You
things.
can use them for curriculum, it's been done before.
I'm sorry?
You
You can do it
Loveland
on
is used
some
in-
technology. Yep. Yes.
What's ESSER?
ESSER is the COVID, it's the emergency, Andrew, ESSER, emergency.
Elementary, secondary school, emergency relief. Basically COVID money that they gave to every school district. Ours was,
What was the last point you made, Linda? Was,
The 1.5
Oh, yeah,
million
contingency.
dollar contingency.
so there's a contingency fund in there, and the reason we put the contingency fund in is, just like when you have any home budget, you want to make sure you've got an emergency fund there. The it's 1.5 or 1.6 million. It is there, 1.5 million. I know for all of us, it sounds like a lot of money. That's 2 weeks of operating for us. So if we have a roof go down, or we have an air handler unit go down, we've got that money. I'll finish. And then the only way we can spend it is if the Board of Education permits us to do that. And so the 1.5 or 1.6 million dollars emergency funds, what you'll see some other districts do is not be as transparent by having that line item where you can't spend it unless the board says yes. You'll see other school district treasurers say, I'm going to put 200 here, 300 here, 300 here, and they know where that emergency funding is. We're trying to be as clear as possible. This is where it is. Good. I'm sorry.
I forgot.
So what
That worked.
What happens if, you're asking for funding for 5 more people if you need them? What happens if you don't need them?
We've passed the resolution where that money is going to be. I don't want to spend that money if I don't need it. It'll be, I point at Kevin, there's other board members here. It'll be earmarked. I've got a Board of Education that keeps a pretty close eye on what we're doing financially. And so it is going to be earmarked, a resolution. The only way we can hire a new staff member is with the Board of Education approving it. I'm not looking to hire FTEs if I don't need them. What we have is,
The question is,
yeah,
if you don't hire anybody, how does that money come back to me, my share?
I can push the levy. Yeah, I can push the levy.
So you just put it in the bank account?
I would love to push the money. Yeah, I would love to do that. Yeah, yes.
So yeah, the $1.59 million contingency fund is in the budget where you went into deficit spending by $6 million. That's the point.
Gotcha. So, yeah, so what Linda's saying, the 1.5, it's a one-time expense, so it's not you're not pulling it out every year. It's there for a line item. It stays as long as we don't use it. It's part of the total revenue versus expenditure.
Although that 1.59 really does kind of go every year because if you take 1.59 million in 2023, and you don't take it in 2024, your spend should be decreased by 1.59 million, but it doesn't. Your spending increases that year.
All I know is I don't want to spend it. It's going to be there at the end of 3 years. So that's 1.5 million. If we have to spend it, it's going to be the Board of
Then
Education.
we need to revamp the 5-year forecast.
All right. Any other questions?
Mike, if I
Yes, go ahead.
just help a little bit there. I think
Yep.
Rob can probably answer that question. But my understanding from talking to him is that the 1.5 is kind of a set aside, and the increases are built in all the other line items.
Right.
So you're setting aside and increasing line items as well?
Well, it's exactly what Mike said. You have inflationary cost increases across the board.
So I hate the word padding, but you're padding each line item with inflationary costs?
Absolutely not.
But I don't understand what you're saying. So you've got a 1.59 contingency and you've got line item increases.
Yeah, and it's exactly what Mike said. Costs increase.
I thought that 1.59 million was for raises?
No,
No, that's
no.
what has to be voted on.
That was never said.
blue stuff here, that maintain the current educational spending?
And that's not 1.59. That's the 85% of the budget. Isn't it?
I think she's saying the contingency is in that, built into that. When you look at the forecast in the budget, it shows that line item, but that's included in the levy ask. It's built into the levy ask, because otherwise where are you going to get that money to put into that line item?
Yeah, I hope we're not talking past each other.
Yeah, that's
here.
what I'm wondering.
My understanding is and has been that they're asking for a set-aside, a contingency fund, what you might call, a lot of people call it, but actually the state calls a rainy day fund. So something unexpected, unforeseen, of some consequence occurs, and they want to have some money set aside to deal with an event like that. That's what the contingency fund is. Do I understand that correctly?
That's correct. Yeah.
Right. And that's separate and distinct from all the various inflationary impacted costs, salaries, benefits, the light bill, the school supplies, everything that goes on, that is really the bulk of the ask, as I understand it.
Yeah.
Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, you're right. If you look at the graph, the bulk of it is the 85% is just to keep doing what we're doing. Just keep doing what we're doing.
So no raises for teachers.
Who said that?
I'm just,
I don't know where this comes from.
I'm just trying to
I think-
figure
I
out
think
where it
everybody's
is.
been saying that,
He said-
people get raises as a normal course of everyday life.
So yes, there will be.
Nobody knows, right?
Okay.
I mean, you should understand.
That's right.
You should
Yeah.
understand
And-
that most of your workforce here is under contract.
Kevin and I are touchy about this because we did it last time.
Most of the employees here are under collective bargaining contracts.
Right.
Right? And there are certain increases that are agreed to during that contractual process. Those contracts have a term, and then they have to be renegotiated.
Right.
So Mike is
Nobody
not going to
knows
go to
what
stand there and
happens
say
at the
there's
time
no
of
raises
renegotiation.
because it's a negotiation that happens with the teachers, which will be happening next spring.
But it's built into
And I look
that.
forward to it.
So if I were to give you, and then I know there's a question over here, Loveland's no different than any other school district. We're not an anomaly. This is how school districts run, right? This is how they run. This is how it works. The 86% percentage that is staffing, if revenues go up a little bit and salaries go up a little bit, the goal is that's going to stay what? 86%, right? Because we've adjusted the same. It's the same percentage. I'm never going to, I have to go through negotiations, which is another fun process, but I have to make sure that I'm being reasonable on both sides and making sure that we're representing the taxpayers and our associations and doing it properly. But I want to make sure we get this question.
Just a question, are there any state mandates out there that might affect our staff?
So the question was, are there any staff mandates that may affect our staffing numbers? And the answer is absolutely yes. It's always in the special education realm. But there's also in the preschool, we have pre-K, which we're required to offer in our early childhood center. What the state of Ohio had mandated 2 years ago was at the preschool level, you had to have one special education teacher for every preschool teacher. That would have added 4 teachers to my staff. I worked with the special education this past year, and we worked with the state and said we can't do it. We can't do that, and they took those requirements off because every district was in the same boat. Some of your larger districts were adding a lot more staff, and that's unfunded, right? They're saying you have to have a special education teacher in it, and that goes back to private versus public. Public schools, we spend a lot of money on special education, rightfully so. We want to take care of those kids, right? But there are requirements. Another requirement, I'll give you an example that just happened. We had a special needs student move into the district this past month with high-level special needs, and on the individual education plan, it required an individual instructional aid with them. That's cost. That's mandated. It's in their IEP. We have to provide it. And so what we try and do is offset. The good news is we have a little bit of ESSER money left that we can try and use some of the ESSER funds to take care of it, so it doesn't affect where we are. in the general fund. But the question of are there mandates, there have been mandate after mandate after mandate that we see. And it's always on behalf of the students and the parents, which is great, but it is a cost to the district. I don't know if that answers your question.
Are there any more looming out there that you might get hit with?
Any more mandates looming out there? Not that, as long as the pre-K doesn't come back, that was put off for this year. But right now I can't think of any that we're going to have to. The real tough part to predict is the special education that you're providing, because the student, and we want to take care of these kids, but when you have a student with high needs move in, not only do they maybe need an instructional aid with them, they also need special transportation. They need somebody riding with them when you transport them. So there's a lot of costs there that can come, and we want to take care of them. That's how you try and manage the budget some way with them.
I mean, just kind of looking at it from another angle, I'm looking at King's, because you said they have one up.
Yeah.
So it's 6.4, and then just doing a quick Google search, they had an operating levy back a few years ago.
About
They
6
passed
years.
6.2 in 2016. So if we haven't done one since 2014, and we're only at 4.9, they did 6.2 2016, 6.4 now. And I think their 6.4 is cost per house.
$18 per 100.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I can't do the math. That's more than
us.
more than us
Yeah.
per house that we're doing.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to get benchmarks here, and I'm sure they have, good reasons for why they're asking for what they are. But it's just, I have a lot of respect for that school district, and I'm like, okay, again, I'm just trying to feel for things that sound reasonable to me, and I can again only speak for myself, but I do think you have a lot of people in the community in the middle who knows where they voted the last times, but I think they recognize big picture. We're here to support the schools. Give us something that's a reasonable levy and a little data to compare it to. And again, I'm just going to say I think you're doing a great job doing it.
The term I use is industry standard. When you look at the industry standard, there are 595 other superintendents in the state of Ohio that wish they were me with this report card, right? And there's only 12 districts. So they wish they were us. We're kicking it, gang. Our teachers are working so hard. We're doing really well.
And Mike, just to reiterate, on the other side, how many districts spend more money per pupil than we do?
In Hamilton County, we are 20th out of 22. I believe it is Reading School District spends less, and it might be Oak Hills. Don't quote me on that. In the state, we talk about expenditures. In the state, we're 304th. We're right in the middle.
With our revenue at?
Our revenue is the bottom 7%, 561st. To me, when you're looking for metrics and you're Googling Kings and all that good stuff, if we're in the bottom 7% for revenue, I find it very difficult to say that we're mismanaging money. I find that very difficult to hear, because I talk about FTEs every single day. I love numbers. I do numbers every single day. I've got a board of education that if I don't present the numbers every board meeting, that I got a problem. We're presenting the FTEs every month. Everything is out there. Everything is out there. You can look at every metric. Financially, we're going to be below average. Academically, we might be number one. And so Loveland, the community, has done a great job to get where they are. We want to keep doing what we're doing and try and keep it reasonable. So, any other?
I just want to, the gentleman back there was talking about, I have a first grader and an eighth grader, and when they go to school, they absolutely love it. Even when eighth grade, 14.
That's pretty good. Eighth grader likes it.
He's one that loves school. He's one of the ones that takes advantage of in eighth grade, going to high school. It's absolutely an amazing program. He loves doing service on their bus drivers. Love their bus drivers. When things that we're doing, you talked about retention, or you didn't talk about retention, but you have retention of your sorry, emotional listening notes. I've been living in Loveland since I was 10 years old. This is and when I think about, you said the teachers have a lot of tenure. They have a lot of tenure. They're doing something right. You are working with people that are engaged, they're inspired, and that's why our kids are absolutely love it. I love looking at part of that. When I working for a large company in our human resources department, I've seen what we've got here with inflation is horrible. And I've seen what we've had to do, the amount of money we've had to invest. We have publicly traded companies, so we also have to consider. And
Sure.
it's called the Great Resignation because so many people are leaving. I'm sure that our teachers are not the highest paid. It's a job that in some way they're there to do it because they love it. And to give them a 10% raise, that is pennies, dollars. It's not that much money. Again, when I think of what increases that we've given our employees, it is so much more than that. Teachers, the little ones, deserve a lot more than what we're doing. So I wanted to say that we have to go.
He's done awesome, by the way. He's done better than me.
But I didn't want to walk out and not tell you we have to.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's hard not to get emotional.
And I want to say something too. So I don't know if you guys know Beth Waxler. So she's a legend at the Loveland High School. And these kids, seriously, Beth, no, it's true. And she's like put her heart and soul, like, and I mean, just to your point, her students still go up to her. Like, I mean, these teachers, these are relationships. This isn't just, it's not always about the money. And I get it. But like, these people change people's lives. So I understand. And I had a daughter that went through the special needs program, and I was grateful for that. And the school helped my daughter, and she had to ride the special needs bus. And so it's so much more than all the negativity. It really is. And I own a business downtown Loveland, and I will tell you, every day we get an ask, and we don't say no. And it's not about that. It's about giving back. And sometimes it's just about, it can't always just be the numbers. It's so much more than that. And what these teachers are dealing with, even from when my kids were younger to where they were now, like the emotional needs, these teachers, it's powerful stuff. So it changes people's lives. So.
This is the best teaching staff I've ever worked with. This is year 36, and I've been in some pretty good districts. So in order to maintain longevity, you have to take care of people. We're not, believe me, we're not throwing money at anybody. I would love to be here 10 years from now. So, but the teachers, the association took 0% on the base the last 2 years, the classified 0%, our administrators 0%. I would love to stay here for many years. People stay because they feel it's not about the money, it's feeling supported, right? Feeling supported. Yeah.
Hey, Mike. Hey, I just want to reiterate what you were saying, you know. You know, it is about you know, and investing in them. And I can't think of anything more that I would want to do than invest in our children, because they are the future. And there's so much going on socially, emotionally with our kids, with COVID, with everything that they've had to go through, even as adults, what we've had to go through. So for me, it's important that we make that investment. You're not asking for a lot. You could ask for a lot more. And yeah, it's going to be costly, but I feel like it's going toward our future.
I appreciate it. Yeah. John, John and I have had many conversations about kids. I would love to have these meetings to talk about kids and what we're doing for kids and how we're going to educate them and what programs. We don't have to offer all the programs under the sun, but if there's a program that we think is great, how can we adjust one program so that we can offer this program? That's the stuff that I like talking about. but this is important also, so here we are. But are there any other questions that you have? This has been awesome. I appreciate everybody being here. I think what I do know about the Loveland community, people are respectful and appreciate what you have, so I appreciate it.
I do want to say one more thing about this whole no trust, this whole thing that's going on. I'm just going to say it. I know most of the people that sit on this board, and they're the most trustworthy people out there. So, you know, just to kind of bring that full circle. So these are people that I've personally known for many years. So I would trust them, and the honesty is there, and I don't, you know, it's just like,
Well, I can say it's it has been our board is awesome. It's one of the best boards I've worked for. I don't know if Dr. Lorenz is still here, but I know Dr. Swetchnow and Kevin Doherty are not going to let me slide without having reasons for everything we do, financially and otherwise. We update them every week, and they hold feet to the fire, but they also have their hearts in the right place about what we're doing. So I'm lucky to have them also. Getting emotional tonight, man. About time to go watch the Guardians play baseball, I guess. I don't know. Any other questions you may have? All right, thank you very much. Have a great evening.